besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing another episode of TBR Takeover. This is my absolute favorite series to film for my channel. I love discovering new books and I love getting recommendations from my friends. If you haven't been here before or you've never seen me do this concept, essentially what I do is I reach out to my booktube friends and I ask them to send a recording of them giving me 3 books to read, and then I vlog myself reading them. It's very simple. It's literally the way that it sounds. They take over my TBR for a week. I just love doing this series because I have found some of my all-time favorite books, and they're often books that I never would have picked up on my own, and so I owe it all to my booktube friends. This week's episode is featuring Regan from PeruseProject. Regan and I have been friends for a couple of years. We actually first met at the 2016 Y'all Fest in Charleston, but we weren't necessarily that close then, and then she moved to New York and she became besties with Monica, who's one of my closest friends. And then I think in 2021, Monica wanted to go on a vacation to LA, and so she and I and Regan and then Emma all went together, and I really got to know Regan a lot better while we were there. She's just one of the funniest and sweetest people that I've ever spent time with. Like, I really love her. I think her personality is so great. She's really well known on her channel for reading fantasy books, so I have a feeling she's going to recommend some to me. I feel like she is that fantasy girl that I always look to for recommendations, and I'm really excited to see what she's picked. So she already sent me the clip, so we're gonna go ahead and react to it, and I just can't wait. I'm so excited.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for including me as a guest picker, a TBR picker for one of your upcoming videos. I'm honestly so honored. I'm also deeply curious to see what you're going to think about the 3 books I've picked out for you today. I feel like we have some really strong overlap, or we differ in extreme ways, but I feel like that's what makes things fun. So the 3 books I picked out today are all fantasy. Shocker, but they're all like different types of fantasy, and I picked them for very specific reasons. So without further ado, let's dive into the TBR. So the first book I picked is Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, the first book to the Legends of the First Empire series. I picked this because you love Michael J. Sullivan's other fantasy series so much. So I thought, hey, this is a perfect excuse to get you to check out the fantasy series I'm currently obsessed with so much. So this is actually a prequel series set thousands and thousands of years prior to the start of the other series you've read and loved so much. It's very pastoral, it's very classic. It's set in kind of like an ancient civilization. It's basically like a human versus elf setup. You are basically introduced to a variety of characters, and humanity sort of lives in very small villages at the beginning of book 1, and they worship this other group called the Frey as gods. But at the beginning of book 1, one of the humans actually kills off the Frey, which was thought to be impossible before this moment, and this kind of acts as the spark to sort of create conflict between these 2 groups of people. There's also lots of other politics at play as well, and you also see the growth and the evolution of human society through this entire series as well. I'm really curious if you're gonna like this one as much as his other series. I personally fell in love with the characters, the world, and the writing, so hopefully you enjoy. Next up, I wanted to recommend kind of a heartwarming, cozy, romance-oriented fantasy book. You really enjoyed Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, which is a book I also really liked. So I decided to recommend The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book will just...
I've already read this book. I'm gonna text Regan right now and ask her to just text me a different book. I had a feeling this was going to happen eventually if someone hadn't been on my Goodreads, which is totally fine. We are going to course correct. I'm gonna text her and I'll put an insert on the screen of a different book. I will say I did unfortunately not enjoy A Secret Society of Regular Witches. I think I gave it 2 stars. So Regan was not wrong when she said that we either have major overlap or completely opposite opinions.
And lastly, I'm recommending a book because I feel like you like weird literary leaning fantasy books, kind of like me. So I'm hoping you enjoy this story, and that is Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is like literary fiction meets middle grade meets adult high fantasy, in my opinion. It has a very peculiar setting, but really great characters to anchor it as well. This book follows our main character Senlin, and he is traveling to this mythical place called the Tower of Babel at the beginning of this book. He's always dreamed of visiting this place. It's full of thousands of floors, numerous amounts of people, and it has like a mythos that that surrounds it. And he decides to travel here with his new wife to celebrate their honeymoon. But unfortunately though, right at the beginning of this book, they're separated. And you follow Senlin as he traverses the terrors and the horrors of this tower to try to find his lost wife. It quickly gets much more complicated than that, but the writing is whimsical and strange and dark, and I think the setting of the tower is just fascinating. Understanding and unpacking its secrets to me was always my favorite part of this book, and I just feel like the stylization of this story would be one that you would enjoy, but I'm curious to see what you think. Okay, Sarah, those are the 3 books I hope you really enjoy, or at least read for this vlog. I'll be waiting patiently for the results.
I actually have heard of Senlin Ascends, but it never really seemed like a book that I would jump to pick up, so I'm really excited to see what I think. I'm excited to read this entire TBR. I still don't know what that second book is, but you guys probably already know before me, and I'll find out when Regan texts me back. Okay, besties, I want to say like 3/4 of the way through Age of Myth, and I don't know how I feel about it. I know that I love the Rhaeria Revelations. Revelations? That's always a hard series title for me to say. Anyway, I love Michael J. Sullivan's other series, and I definitely understand why Regan recommended Age of Myth. Is it called Age of Myth? Am I just making that up? I think it's called Age of Myth. I should know. I've been reading it for a while. But I think that this one has a little bit more complex world building than what the Rhaeria I literally never want to say that series title again. That series is set a lot farther in the future. They're actually connected, and that one doesn't have as much magic in it because it's like after a lot of magic has died out, so there's not as much world building, and this one has a lot more to explain. So I think my pea brain is getting a little confused. Like, I don't really read high fantasy a ton, so I'm a little afraid for the rest of this vlog, because obviously Regan has recommended a lot of things that need me to use my brain, and I don't know if I'm very good at that. I feel like I've only been complaining and haven't really been saying what I do. Like, I do like the characters, and I think I'm going to like this series, probably. I'm just struggling right now in this first book because I really feel like it's like setting up a lot of things, and we're following a lot of different people, and a lot of different stuff is going on. Like, people are fading, and they're kind of explaining the fray and the gods, and I'm just kind of like, who are we talking about? Honestly, I might look up an explanation of what's going on in this book, because like I said, I feel like an idiot. I feel dumb. I don't really think it's the book's fault. I think it might be my fault. But unrelated to that, you might notice that I'm wearing a Ghostface shirt right now because tonight I'm going to see Scream 6. When I went to visit Elias in LA, he made me watch Scream 4 and 5 because he's a huge fan of the movie franchise. Like, the Scream movies are actually really good. I don't know what I thought they were like. I think I saw the first and second one when I was a kid, and I just didn't really think anything of it after that, but they're very camp, very meta, very slay. Like, I really enjoy them. And so I actually went to Spencer's and bought this t-shirt because I really wanted to embody the experience that we're going to be having tonight. And yeah, so that has nothing to do with this fantasy book that I'm reading, but I just thought you guys should know that. And maybe I'll film a little clip of us at the movie theater because I feel like Scream 6 is going to be very iconic.
We have to finish the movie. Who gives a fuck about movies?
Oh my god, besties, I just finished Age of Myth, and I know I was like not so sure about it in my last update, but the ending was kind of iconic. I really enjoyed it. I think the issue with me in high fantasy, especially adult high fantasy, is that my noggin, my brain, is like a pea brain, and it moves kind of slow when it comes to fantasy. So it takes me a long time to warm up to the politics and the magic, like as I was saying earlier. And so I was just kind of like, am I too dumb for this? I'm not really enjoying it. But when I got to that midpoint where I understood who the Frey were and who the runes were and what the source of power and magic and all that was, I was like, okay, slay Mr. Michael J. Sullivan. I totally get where we're going with this. And just the ending, like the battle and discovering like how certain characters were connected, and then like the final conversation, like there was like the last page of the book was kind of a big reveal. I'm actually very excited to read the second book in the series. I think I'm going to give this 4 stars. I didn't quite love it as much as Theft of Swords. I feel like that book really just like drew me in really intensely right off the bat, and this one I feel like it was a little bit more complicated. I think if you want to read Michael J. Sullivan and you're not very used to reading fantasy, then I would highly recommend starting with the Rhaeria Revelations, because Theft of Swords as an intro is a lot easier to understand than Age of Myth was, just because there is far less fantasy and it's more like human politics that you really need to, you know, figure out. But overall, I really enjoyed Age of Myth, and I really am so happy that the second half of this got so much better for me. Like, I didn't dislike the first half, but I feel like in my earlier update you could tell that I just wasn't so sure because it was like taking a long time for me to understand. But I just have to be very patient when I read fantasy because I just want to have all the answers at once. And because Michael J. Sullivan doesn't really do info dumping, it takes you a while to kind of get it. It's very like nuanced, like as he delivers the information. So I really enjoyed this. It was really good, and I highly recommend listening to the fully dramatized versions of his books. So I did that with Theft of Swords, and then I also did that with this, and so it has a full cast of narrators, and there's sound effects and music and stuff, so it really feels like you're watching like a fantasy movie like in your mind, and it's really good. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm really glad that you recommended this, Regan. I knew that you knew that I'd like it because I like Michael J. Sullivan, and I doubted you a little bit in the first half. I knew eventually it was probably going... Billy? Sorry, my dog is chewing her bone in the background. Regardless, I doubted a little bit in the first half, but Regan knew in her heart that I was gonna like this, and she was right. She was right. I just am kind of dumb sometimes when it comes to fantasy. But the great news is that now I have to go read the 5th season and then Senlin Ascends, which both probably have a lot of fantasy elements to understand as well. So this whole vlog is just a little challenge for me. Also, you may be wondering what the hell you're looking at behind me right now. Today I filmed my 5-star audit where I talked about like all the books that I've given 5 stars. Billy, please, do you have to chew that while I'm giving this update? Like, I'm gonna be done like so fast. What I was trying to say is I filmed my 5-star audit, which is essentially a video where I went over all the books I've given 5 stars and what they have in common. Theft of Swords is actually right here, down here. I feel like you can't really see that on camera. So these are just like how they're all connected. And at this point when I'm uploading this video, I probably have already posted this last week. So if you want to watch last week's upload, you should go ahead and watch this video because I kind of went for like a Pepe Silva meme approach to like pointing out all the books that I've given 5 stars and what they have in common. So that's just a little promo for last week's vid. But yeah, so I'm gonna move on to the 5th season and we'll check in soon. A couple of things to acknowledge before we get into talking about this book. Number 1, my appearance. I know it's not great. I have pimple patches. Am I the only one whose skin is breaking out like crazy lately? I don't know if it's because I've been taking biotin or what. I know that that can like make you break out, but I am not loving what's happening on my face. I'm a 31-year-old woman and I have so much acne and it's so upsetting. Number 2, the lighting is a little bit bad. I'm cooking right now. You might be able to hear what I'm making bubbling. I was gonna lift it up, but it's actually on the stove right now, so I'll actually bring you to it. I'm cooking like a pasta situation. I'm boiling water. It's a whole thing. I'll show you when I'm done with it. I don't know why, but I've never really wanted to read the 5th season. I actually started it, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago. It was like 2018 or 2019. I know it was pre-pandemic because it was when I was in the thick of my YA era, and adult fantasy just wasn't really something that interested me. And so I don't really know why I started it. I feel like a lot of people were talking about the 5th season at the time. I know people like Riley and Monica were like huge fans, and so I think that's why I gave it a go. I think I got like 15% of the way through and I was like, my brain is not comprehending this, so I ended up DNFing it, and then I just never really was interested in picking it up again. I need to put this Greek yogurt into what I'm making right now. I'm trying to do like a healthy creamy pasta thing. We'll see what happens, but this Greek yogurt smells horrible. I really like yogurt, but I think it smells so bad. I don't know if I'm the only person that feels that way about it. Like, it's tasty, but the smell is ungodly. As I was saying, that brings us to now, and obviously Regan has asked me to read this and I've read it. And like I said, it's one of the best books I've ever read in my life. I'm very mad at myself for not reading it sooner. Don't get me wrong. It is a very confusing book, and it did take me like 25% of it to actually understand what was going on with like the magic system and the powers. I feel like all you really need to know is it's like earthbenders who have been made slaves that have the most power in the whole world, but they've been beaten down into submission, and then they are trying to find their way in this world, if that makes any sense. And then obviously there's a lot to do with like natural disasters, like tsunamis, all these different things. So these earthbenders help control the earth, and so when there's earthquakes or, like I said, tsunamis or things going on, they like still them, and so they like make it all better. But they are basically considered lesser than human, even though they are the most powerful beings on this planet. I feel like that's my best way of describing that. What I really like about this book is that we're following 3 different timelines. We're following a young girl named Demaya, then we're following a character named Cyanide, and then we're also following a character named Essun. Demaya is a young girl who has recently discovered she is an origin, which is the name for these earthbender people. There's also a slur that people use for them called raga, which I feel like was a really interesting thing for N.K. Jemisin to include, because N.K. Jemisin is a black woman, and so I feel like there's a lot about these people being oppressed, and the way that she does diversity in this is so seamless. She just casually mentions that people have different skin colors, have different sexualities, different things. It's all just slowly comes through the story, and I really appreciate that. So I found the use of the word raga very interesting, because at one point a lot of these origins start using the word raga to describe themselves, even though it used to be a slur. So it kind of reminded me a lot of the N-word. So I feel like there could be a lot to unpack with N.K. Jemisin's books, knowing like her own background. So it was very intriguing, to say the least. Demaya recently discovered that she's an origin, and so her family denounces her, and she gets taken by this person who is called a guardian to this place called the Fulcrum. And the Fulcrum is basically a place where they train origins to help the world and stay docile. And then we also follow Sara I, who is someone who is considered a fourth ringer, meaning that she's been in the Fulcrum for a long time and she's been earning her rings, and so she's sent on different missions and different things. And so she gets paired up with this other guy named Alabaster, who she's supposed to mate with to make a new origin. And so they are basically forced to have sex and copulate, and then they are also sent on a different mission, and a bunch of stuff happens there. And then the last character that I was mentioning, Esun, her chapters are really interesting because they're actually written in second person. So they say you, like you are Esun, you are doing this, you are doing that. And so the very beginning of the novel, she's actually the first character that we get to know. She discovers that her small 3-year-old son has been beaten to death by her husband, and he has taken off with her daughter. And so she's sort of on a quest to go find him. And then the reason the whole book is called the 5th season is because they deal with these natural disasters, like I was saying, and sometimes they have these things called seasons where the world essentially is almost going to end because of what's going on in the earth, like with the natural disasters. And so yeah, I don't know why I'm describing the plot to you even more in detail. I feel like you don't need to know all this, but I'm so fascinated by the way that N.K. Jemisin wove this story together. The writing is just so flawless, and once the world building clicks, you're like, oh my god, like she's doing something so interesting, so clever, so powerful. And it's, I don't know, I cannot wait to keep reading. I was kind of sad that I had another book to read before I could go back to reading this, and I actually have another reading vlog I'm starting immediately after this, so I won't really be able to finish the season anytime soon. But season, I said season, I meant series. I really want to finish it ASAP because it was so good. It was just so good. I'm really grateful, Miss Regan, for you making me read this book. It's so good. It's so fascinating. I am going to be giving it 5 stars. I cried at the end. I felt so much emotion. Like the deeper I got into the story, the more I was engrossed with it, with the magic, with the just powers, with the different things going on, just like the psychology of this idea of these really powerful people that are origins that can literally like shake the earth's core, but they have been brought to heel by regular human people. And there's just so much like mindfuckery going on with these origin characters, and them being taught that they're like not human beings and that they are like other and bad and cursed and all these interesting things. But it's so good. It's so good. Some of the best writing I've ever experienced in my life, especially in adult fantasy. And I think it makes a ton of sense why this is a series that people talk about so often. I feel like anyone who's into adult fantasy has read this before and mentioned that it's really good. It's just like, I don't even know what to say besides that it's good. It's just so good. It came out edible, but not correct.
It's the best thing ever.
Okay, besties, I have finished Senlin Ascends, and this really took me on an interesting journey. The only thing I can really think to compare this to is maybe like The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland. As Regan previously brought up, this book is about a guy named Senlin who travels to the Tower of Babel with his wife. And basically in this world, the Tower of Babel has been lauded as this feat of engineering, this fantastical place. It's this crazy tower that everyone talks about in textbooks as being just amazing for tourists and everyone that lives there. And each level of the tower is a different ringdom. And so each ringdom has a different thing going on in it. And so when Senlin arrives to this tower, he loses his wife, Marisa, and he has to go and find her. And so I would say like the first like 25 to almost even like 50% of this book, I was like so unsure about how to feel about it because it's very odd. The reason I compare it to Alice in Wonderland or the Wizard of Oz is that Senlin is sort of this like naive main character that is thrown into this land of just like deceit and like different peril going on, and nothing makes sense. Everything is very nonsensical, similar to how Alice is when she falls into like Wonderland, where everybody's just like speaking in riddles, nobody's really helping him. And so I kind of just felt like it was like an adult version of that. I did go into this thinking that it was a fantasy book, but I wouldn't really describe it as fantasy. I feel like it is more, I don't know, like nonsensical, steampunk-esque. Like, I don't really know what the exact genre is for this. Maybe magic is going to come up eventually, but I have not come across magic yet. This is a 4-book series. I wasn't really sure how it was going to pan out as I was listening. I thought maybe it was a standalone, but then I looked it up and I saw that there are 3 more books in the series. But as I was saying, up to the 50% mark, I was sort of like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. I'm a little bit confused. And it's not because the world building is like especially confusing, like there's no magic system. It's more so, like I keep saying, very nonsensical, and everyone is out for themselves in this Tower of Babel. And so every time Senlin asks a question, people don't really want to help him. Like, for example, in one of the first ringdoms that Senlin comes upon, he is thrust into a play. It's sort of like a theater ringdom, and so he's given a part that he has to play, and so he is just forced to act. And these plays go on for like 2 weeks, and they're like ways for tourists to kind of like escape their lives. And so he is made to be like this butler, and he comes across this woman who's supposed to be playing like the female lead of this play, and then they have to run away because this like crazy guy is like trying to kill them. I feel like that doesn't make any sense, but I feel like that's good that it doesn't make sense me explaining it to you, because then you'll know how I felt when I was reading it. But I would say when I got to the halfway mark, the story was getting a lot more linear. We were getting a lot more goals happening, and I felt like Senlin actually had a lead on like where his wife had gone, and so the story definitely took off from there. And slowly but surely there was a bunch of side characters that got added that started making me like the book a lot more, because up until that point Senlin's journey is very lonesome and he doesn't really have a lot of friends. And so I feel like after he starts making friends and they stay pretty consistent in the story is when I started really enjoying this. And so there definitely were parts where I thought I was going to rate this 3 stars, but now having finished the book, I think I'm going to rate it 4, and I definitely actually think I'm going to continue the series because I really wasn't sure up to that point. I'm actually invested now in knowing where this is going. And like I mentioned earlier, Senlin is very naive when he enters the tower, and so by the time we leave him at the end of the book, he is much more self-possessed, he has more of a mission on his mind, and he is just more of a impressive and fun character to read from. Up until, again, like the halfway point, he was kind of a loser, and I was like, why does his wife even like him? He's kind of lame. His background is that he is a headmaster of a school in a very small town, and so he's very like prudish, he's very buttoned up, and his wife is just this like free-spirited young thing. And so I didn't really understand like why they were together. But towards the end of the book, I feel like he really maintains his genuine and sweet nature, but also becomes a little bit more conniving and a little bit more just like knowing what he's doing. And so I really enjoyed that character development, and I'm curious to see where we go with this, because there is a big like battle scene at the end of the book and there's a big escape, and so I feel like we can only go up from here, literally, because he's going up in the tower to try and find his wife. But that brings us to the end of the vlog. I have completed all 3 books that Regan wanted me to read, and I ended up really enjoying all of them. The 5th season is hands down one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read of all time. Sorry. By the way, I got a Stanley Cup recently, and it has been life-changing. So if you've seen all the hype on TikTok, I'm here to say that it's true. I will say if you already have a Hydro Flask, you probably don't need this, but I have been loving this cup so much, and I actually put a sticker on it from my Etsy shop. A little self-promo for a second. I don't really talk about my Etsy shop very much, but I make stickers, and this one's really cute. It says main character energy, and it looks really cute on my Stanley Cup. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Absolutely love the 5th season. Really happy that Regan made me read that. And I also really enjoyed Age of Myth. Gave that 4 stars. And then now we have Senlin Ascends, which I've also given 4 stars. So Regan, that's a pretty good rating for a TBR takeover. If you for some reason have never been to Regan's channel but you need some fantasy recs, I will link her down below. You absolutely should go over to her and subscribe. Although I'm pretty sure it's the other way around, where you're coming out and checking my channel out because she's recommended me because she's quite popular. If you've made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, feel free to use the bow emoji in your comments, since I have these bows on my braids. I feel like one of them fell out actually. But anyway, you can leave a bow in your comment and I'll know you made it here and it'll be a cute little moment between us. And thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.